sungai yang keruh, aku hanya berdoa, sisakan bayang wajah.
Bapak Ibu yang berbahagia, terlebih dahulu kami sampaikan informasi demi kelancaran dan ketertiban acara pada pagi ini. Tidak diperkenankan untuk makan, minum, dan merokok di dalam konsert hall Pascasarjana isi Yogyakarta. Dan kami mohon kepada Bapak serta Ibu demi tertib dan lancarnya acara pada hari ini untuk mengaktifkan handphone atau alat komunikasi lainnya dalam mode silent. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam kebajikan, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Kami ucapkan selamat pagi dan selamat datang kepada Bapak Ibu tamu undangan yang telah hadir dalam acara Simposium Khatulistiwa 2022 dengan tema Kuat Akar, Kuat Tanah yang bertempat di Pascasarjana isi Yogyakarta pada hari Jumat 28 Oktober 2022. Juga mengucapkan selamat datang kepada yang terhormat Kepala Dinas Kebudayaan Ibu Dian Raqs Media SSMA, kemudian kepada yang kami hormati Direktur Program Pascasarjana isi Yogyakarta Dr. Fortunata Tias Rinestu MSI atau yang mewakili, kemudian Bapak dan Ibu tamu undangan yang berbahagia. Simposium Khatulistiwa merupakan salah satu program Yayasan Biennale Yogyakarta yang merupakan sebuah forum internasional yang dirancang sebagai arena pertemuan ahli, pemikir, praktisi, peneliti dari berbagai bidang ilmu. Ini adalah acara untuk berbagi informasi dan pengetahuan, bertukar pikiran dan pendapat sebagai upaya membangun pemahaman kritis atas berbagai praktik seni rupa kontemporer dalam kaitannya dengan dinamika sosial, budaya, dan politik di kawasan Khatulistiwa. Tahun 2022 ini, Simposium Khatulistiwa diselenggarakan untuk 5 kalinya. Simposium Khatulistiwa 2022 bertemakan Kuat Akar, Kuat Tanah, yang berupaya untuk melihat bagaimana kerja-kerja di beberapa gerakan lokal yang terhubung bersama dalam konteks lebih luas yang menjadi solidaritas transnasional, sehingga Simposium Khatulistiwa melibatkan 3 pembicara luar negeri, 24 pembicara Indonesia, dan moderator dari berbagai latar belakang. Bapak Ibu tamu undangan yang berbahagia, sungguh merupakan suatu kehormatan bagi saya, Gita Amalia, untuk dapat menjadi bagian di momen yang luar biasa, tentunya bersama orang-orang yang luar biasa. Selanjutnya adalah sambutan yang akan disampaikan oleh Kepala Dinas Kebudayaan Ibu Dian Lakasmi Pratiwi SSMA. Kepadanya, bisa.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sehat, salam sejahtera untuk semuanya. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan, Rahayu, salam budaya, lestari budayaku. Yang kami hormati pimpinan Yayasan Biennale Yogyakarta, yang kami hormati para seniman perupa, kurator, peneliti, penulis, analis budaya, dan yang saya hormati para hadirin tamu undangan semua yang berbahagia. Puji syukur kami panjatkan kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, Tuhan yang Maha Kuasa, atas karunia-Nya sehingga pada pagi hari ini kita bisa berkumpul bersama dalam penyelenggaraan acara yang luar biasa, Simposium Khatulistiwa Translokal Transhistorical yang terlaksana di konser hall Pascasarjana isi Yogyakarta tanggal 28 Oktober 2022. Biennale Jogja adalah biennale internasional yang berfokus pada seni rupa kontemporer sejak tahun 2011 yang berangkat dari titik Khatulistiwa 23,27 derajat bintang utara dan bintang selatan. Khatulistiwa inilah yang menjadi titik berangkat dan akan menjadi common platform untuk membaca kembali dunia. Dan seri ekuator ini telah menjajaki dan kemudian telah berkolaborasi dengan seniman-seniman di sepanjang garis Khatulistiwa seperti India di tahun 2011, Arab Saudi di tahun 2013, Afrika tahun 2015, Amerika Latin 2017, dan Asia Pasifik tahun 2019. Selanjutnya dalam tata pergaulan dan perusahaan global, budaya menjadi benteng dan identitas untuk dikenal dan memperkenalkan diri kepada bangsa lain. Kearifan lokal memang pada dasarnya dipandang sebagai landasan pembentukan jati diri bangsa secara translokal atau nasional. Dan budaya etnik ini sering berfungsi sebagai sumber atau acuan untuk penciptaan baru. Bapak Ibu sekalian yang berbahagia, Biennale Jogja ini akan menjadi wadah dalam forum internasional, dan simposium kali ini akan mencoba mempresentasikan apa yang sudah terjadi di Jogja dan akan menjadi tempat muara semua gagasan dan ide untuk merumuskan strategi organisasi dalam 10 tahun mendatang dalam pergaulan dunia serta relasi dengan komunitas dan jejaring nasional. Dan tentunya gagasan tentang translokal dan transhistorikal dimunculkan untuk memberikan satu ruang bagi sejarah yang lain dengan spirit yang sama, meskipun berada kawasan di luar global selatan untuk bertukar pengalaman melalui kerja seni budaya. Harapan kami, khususnya di daerah istimewa Yogyakarta, pada visi misi Bapak Gubernur Daerah Istimewa Yogyakarta pada abad Samudra, memang ada 3 hal kualitas yang menjadi perhatian utama kita dalam pengembangan dan pemajuan kebudayaan, yaitu yang terkait dengan sumber daya budaya, yang terkait dengan perilaku budaya, yang terkait dengan kehidupan budaya. Dan tentunya kami berharap bahwa simposium ini nanti akan mampu menghasilkan ide-ide, gagasan, pemikiran, bagaimana kita mencoba mengkomunikasikan terkait dengan 3 hal: kontinuitas, bagaimana akar lokal, seni, tradisi yang menjadi kearifan kita semua menuju pada arah-arah yang kontemporer, dan bagaimana konvergen bisa terjadi, bagaimana budaya-budaya kita kemudian mampu berakulturasi dengan budaya-budaya luar dan mampu juga secara konsentris seirama dengan budaya global. Dan tentu saja harapan kita bersama bahwa simposium ini mampu nantinya berkontribusi dalam menjaga dan merawat kehidupan dan perilaku masyarakat yang kemudian menjunjung tinggi nilai-nilai keberagaman, toleransi, tenggang rasa, dan juga gotong royongan bersama. Dan tentunya jejaring dan kemitraan yang berbasis lokal seperti yang kita miliki, desa budaya, kawasan cagar budaya, dan lain-lain, mungkin bisa menjadi salah satu alternatif gagasan untuk di tahun-tahun mendatang. Demikian yang bisa kami sampaikan. Selamat bersimposium, semoga bisa menghasilkan ide, gagasan, pemikiran yang bermanfaat bagi kesejahteraan kita semua. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Kami sampaikan terima kasih kepada Ibu Dian Lakasmi Pratiwi SSMA atas sambutan yang telah diberikan. Sambutan selanjutnya akan disampaikan oleh Direktur Yayasan Biennale Jogja, Ibu Alia Swastika. Kepadanya disilakan.
Selamat pagi semuanya. Good morning everyone. Semoga semua dapat istirahat yang cukup tadi malam sehingga kita bisa memulai hari ini dengan pikiran yang lebih cerah dan bisa menyerap semua yang nanti akan disampaikan oleh para presenter dan pembicara. Terima kasih kepada Ibu dan Laksmi dari Dinas Kebudayaan Yogyakarta yang telah membuka acara ini. Terima kasih untuk Pak Warno Suryodiningratan yang memfasilitasi kami untuk bisa menggunakan tempat ini. Jadi beberapa kali Yayasan Biennale Yogyakarta menggunakan ruang konsep hall Pascasarjana isi dan merasa untuk diskusi ini yang paling ideal sekarang. Terima kasih Pak. Ya, saya tidak akan berpanjang lebar, mungkin sedikit saja berbicara tentang apa yang mengulangi sedikit apa yang sudah disampaikan Ibu Dian tentang solidaritas translokal dan gerakan solidaritas transnasional dan gerakan translokal dalam tema Kuat Akar, Kuat Tanah ini yang akan menjadi jembatan untuk menutup rangkaian Biennale Jogja Ekuator putaran pertama yang telah berlangsung sejak 2011 hingga 2021 yang lalu menuju putaran kedua yang nanti kita tidak lagi secara khusus bekerja sama dengan negara-negara tertentu tetapi lebih bersifat global dalam cakupan yang translokal dan transnasional itu. Jadi tidak lagi berbasis pada negara bangsa tetapi melihat solidaritas antar warga sebagai titik tumbuh dari gerakan global itu sendiri. Jadi dalam 2 hari ke depan kita akan mendengarkan presentasi dari teman-teman semua. Sebagian dari mereka hasil dari open call atau panggilan terbuka, sehingga kita mendapatkan ada hampir 40 proposal yang kita terima untuk diseleksi, sehingga yang kita terima menjadi 6 dan sisanya adalah teman-teman yang kita undang dari berbagai latar belakang. Jadi dalam 2 hari ke depan kita akan menguji, kita akan saling mendengarkan, kita akan memperdebatkan gagasan tentang transnasional dan translokal itu sendiri, dan itu akan menjadi masukan yang berharga bagi para penyelenggara Biennale Jogja di masa depan untuk merumuskan ulang. Sebenarnya kalau tadi Ibu Dian sudah sempat menyebut ya, kalau di Jogja sendiri bagaimana sih arah kita untuk menjadi bagian dari pergaulan global. Nah itu akan kita bahas selama 2 hari ke depan. Nah karena ini hari yang cukup spesial ya, karena 28 Oktober kita memperingati Sumpah Pemuda kebetulan juga. So actually today is quite a special day for Indonesian. It is a national day for apa bahasa Inggrisnya? Ada bahasa Inggrisnya. So this is like the day when the first imagination of what so-called Indonesia being declared by the young people. So we declare that we use the Indonesia as the national language, and yeah, like every 28 October we celebrate this kind of like the declaration from the youth for the new nationalism. So to start the day and also to kind of like commemorating the Sumpah Pemuda, we will invite you. We can sing the national anthem of Indonesia together. Boleh disiapkan Mas Didi? Kita berdiri sebentar ya. Ini bagian yang lebih pendek dari lagu Indonesia Raya. Ini tidak ada yang memimpin karena saya bukan konduktor ya. Jadi anggap aja seperti karaoke. Kuat, Akar, Tanah diselenggarakan oleh Yayasan Biennale Yogyakarta, didukung oleh Direktorat Jenderal Kebudayaan Kementerian Pendidikan Kebudayaan, Riset dan Teknologi melalui Lembaga Pengelola Dana Pendidikan dalam program pemanfaatan hasil kelola dana abadi kebudayaan tahun 2022 bersama dengan Dinas Kebudayaan Daerah Istimewa Yogyakarta dan Taman Budaya Yogyakarta. Kami mengucapkan terima kasih juga untuk dukungan yang sangat besar dari para presenter kepada two of our keynote speaker, Jeebesh Bagchi and Jeebesh and Memalai. Is that's the way to pronounce? That you delighted to come here and being part of our symposium today. Juga kepada seluruh peserta yang meluangkan waktu datang pagi-pagi ke Pascasarjana isi, dan kita akan belajar bersama-sama ke 2 hari ke depan. Terima kasih semuanya, selamat bersimposium.
Kami ucapkan terima kasih atas sambutan yang telah diberikan Ibu Alia Swastika selaku Direktur Yayasan Biennale Jogja. Bapak Ibu dan tamu undangan, acara selanjutnya adalah pembicara kunci. Presentasi pembicara kunci dengan judul Praktik Seni Global dan Dekolonisasi yang disampaikan oleh Mr. Jeebesh Bagchi dan akan dipandu oleh Ibu Mitha Budhyarto. Ibu Mitha Budhyarto merupakan dosen di Lasalle College of the Arts Singapura, di mana beliau mengajar kajian budaya di Fakultas Desain, dan beliau mendapatkan gelar PhD Humanities and Cultural Studies dari University of London, Redgate College. Penelitiannya telah diterbitkan dan dipresentasikan di berbagai jurnal dan konferensi akademik. Sebagai peneliti dan kurator, beliau juga telah menerima hibah dari institusi nasional dan internasional. Langsung saja kita sambut Ibu Dr. Mitha Budhyarto. Kepadanya disilakan.
Oh ya, maaf untuk teman-teman yang membutuhkan translasi, bisa masuk ke Zoom. Kalau teman-teman membawa device, kita menyediakan translator melalui Zoom.
Halo, selamat pagi teman-teman semuanya. Terima kasih MC untuk pengenalan terhadap saya. Sekarang saya di sini sebagai saya akan memperkenalkan keynote speaker kita hari ini. Dan kemudian berusaha tadi sesuai dengan request saya ada karena beliau akan memperkenalkan beberapa istilah-istilah baru yang sedang dikerjakan oleh Raqs Media Collective. Saya juga akan berusaha menerjemahkan istilah-istilah tersebut. Pertama-tama saya pakai bahasa Inggris. Let me introduce our keynote speaker in English. So it is a great honor for us to have Jeebesh Bagchi with us today. Jeebesh is part of Raqs Media Collective, a collective whose practice falls in the intersection between art making, curating, research, writing, and other forms of experimental artistic expression that include multimedia, architecture, computer programming, and more. Since its founding in 1992, the group has been an active part of the international art world, which in his presentation today and aligned with our theme, we hope to hear some enlightening thoughts on the idea of global art today and also on the issues of decolonization. As artists, they have exhibited in seminal platforms such as Documenta 11, the Biennales of Venice, Istanbul, Taipei, Liverpool, Sydney, Sao Paulo, among others. Their work has also been shown at Pompidou Paris, Tate Britain, Art Unlimited Basel, Mori Museum Tokyo, SALT, and many, many more. As curator exhibits, their curatorial work range from the 7th edition of Manifesta and the International Roving Exhibition Indian Highway, initiated by the Serpentine Gallery in London. In 2013, they initiated Sarai Reader 09 as a curatorial process of exhibiting, making, and unmaking. Raqs Media Collective was also appointed curator of the 11th edition of the Shanghai Biennale in 2016. Today, the overarching theme is global art practices and decolonization, and Jeebesh will talk us through some of the ideas that Raqs Media Collective are currently thinking through in relation to those overarching themes. There are terms like the caravanserai, bunker vision, tenurial densities. All these are terms that I will try my very best to translate. Terms like shadows and associative glimmer. So without further ado, let's welcome Jeebesh to our talk today.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Arya, for inviting me, and thank you all for coming in the morning. You know, in Delhi we usually start around 10:30, 11 because the morning. So here it is interesting. It's Eastern. What I plan. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Okay.
It's okay. What I plan to do is take you through some of the concepts that we are working with. These are body of personal concepts and some shared concepts with friends to negotiate the turn that has happened over the last few years, over the last decade, but actually if you look at it, it's been taking shape in the last 20-25 years. And this turn is basically towards a new way to rethink the world, rethink our planet, rethink our life in it. And art for us is a very important side to do this. So just stay with me for these are the broad concepts that I will, or words you can say, that I will take through some kind of works that we have done, some from the archive, some from some historical events, and try to situate the present. And what is the present that we think is now taking shape, and what kind of contestations are in play.
Jadi Jeebesh, seperti tadi saya bilang, dia akan berusaha mencoba memaknai apa yang sedang terjadi sekarang. Maksudnya mulai dari 20-25 tahun yang lalu, dan ada istilah-istilah ini yang akan dia gunakan untuk menjelaskan posisi kita sekarang ini, kontestasi apa dan ya posisi apa yang di mana tempat kita berada sekarang ini.
So first I will take this idea of the caravanserai. This is something that we initiated in about 22 years now. The idea is that ideas and people are always in movement, and those movements are slow. They are not, and they are connected with each other, and they need resting places and places to come together where they can exchange ideas and then move again. It's some kind of way in which castle was being theorized by women around the world. That castle we join together and then we move in our way. It's a kind of idea that caravanserai is. It's like a place is temporary, and the temporariness holds the world, and you then move in different directions. So one of the things that we set up some kind of a sarai, we call it, in 2000, and then we did a lot of work with many people. So one of the residue was this set of 9 books that we did. I just wanted you to go through the names of those 9 books. This is from 2001 till 2012. And you can see the shift in that decay. So it starts with public domain, cities of everyday life, then technology, then crisis media, then law takes over. Then it becomes turbulence, frontier, fear, and then we ended with projections. So the idea was that in 2012 to redo ourselves and rethink. So it ends with projection. It starts with public domain, ends with projection. And then we didn't publish. This has a book about 500 to 600 people have written over a period of 10 years. Some completely new, some translated material, lot of people, some very famous people also wrote, and some Nobel laureates also landed up writing for it. But and also unknown, unlettered also wrote for it. Through oral testimonies. So this is broadly the picture, but this picture is twice. It's about the number of people that associate with us, which we slowly can develop a concept of it. And also the conceptual frame shifts in that decade.
No, there's actually a translator Zoom.
Okay.
So
Perfect. Super. So one tentative concept that we put in play was this called the art as place. This was the Sarai Reader where we were invited by a kind of a collection-based museum to do a show. So we said we won't do any show, we won't show anything from the collection, but what we'll do is empty the museum completely. So we emptied it, and we will invite artists to work in situ with other artists, and that will be the work. So over 9 months, 100 artists worked in that place. So at the end of it, when we were asked what was it, we tentatively formulated the idea of art as a place. The idea, the word place has lost its power with the word site and space. Space has taken over, space-time, physics came and took over a kind of imaginary of space, and it has done fabulous rethinking on space, but space kind of displaced place, and site, which came from architecture and urban planning, displaced place. So now you won't see much thinking of place, and for us, the idea of return to the idea of the place was interesting because art seems to occupy a kind of a discomforting relationship to both space and site, so that we renamed it art as a place. And so this is broadly a framework which was, as things developed and grew over a period of time, we got a concept to think ourselves. So this is the second one is the bunker vision. But now this is an island that this is an island called the Andaman Islands. You know Andaman Islands, it's in the island Bay of Bengal, where it's an interesting island because it has a very old habitation of population, which are anthropologically called primitive tribes, aboriginal tribes. Hello, sir. Aboriginal tribes or primitive tribes. There were a lot of them. Some of them don't survive much. Still, like the Jarawas, still are in their old settlement, kind of almost like a reserve settlement. But they sensed the tsunami. They moved up the tree. So this island was made into a penal island in 1858 by the British. They made it into a penal island, they occupied it, and they made all the criminal trials, people were thrown there. And then it set up one of the most notorious jails called the Panopticon jail, the cellular jail, where the political prisoners were sent. And this island became part of Second World War, and the Japanese took over. And then when the Japanese took over, then there was a fighting, and then the British again took over, and then the British again took over, and then it was handed over after India got independent. So this island was named Free India before India, because when the Japanese declared it Free India. So it has an interesting history of photography, interesting history. But all over the island, all over the islands are these bunkers. Next one. So, and these bunkers are interesting because this is in 1993. We never made a work on it, but it is something that has stayed as an inquiry, both anthropologically, photography, and as a bunker vision. Is that the bunker is and this is something that I was trying to communicate, is the loss of horizon. In the sense, the horizon is the threat. So the bunker vision for us is this, where the horizon stands as a threat. So your hold on the territory becomes so concrete that you lose the sight of the horizon, because horizon can be always a production of a threat. Now this is something that we realized that the island was kind of bunkered, or because of the Second World War and pre-Second World War, as a fortification. And the bunker vision stayed as a kind of a way of inquiry into there is this kind of heart, there is a kind of a strong dominant thread within modernity of production, continuous production of bunker visions, where the threat occupies the primary post, then the horizon. So the loss of the horizon becomes part. So threat could be, like in India now, threat could be anyone. You can produce any minority as a threat, you can produce any intellectual as a threat. So threat, because the horizon is completely blurred, you can produce anyone as a threat. So this is bunker vision. Why am I saying is that this is a very crucial part of the way the nation states now function, the political infrastructures now functions, within which a lot of our different other kinds of practices, which are now different names, different ways of doing it, occupy. So this is a kind of a larger terrain where the art as the place has to work within. So, and this is why am I writing it with the apostrophe is that I'm doing an experimental course in Delhi. So this developed this word. A student got very possessed by this word, and because I was speaking this, we were talking, and then he said, "I understood it," and he used the word "cusp," which was very nice because the classroom we reread the word. So this is a short story I'm saying. This story is connected to this production of this word. This is an image in 1973 in a small village called Mandal. Here, these women are holding the tree from not being cut. So this image has another image, the image of the loggers, huge loggers opposite, standing with saw machines to cut the trees. And it's in 1973. What is interesting is that this, if you type in this image or in the internet, if you look for early environmental movement in India, this image will keep on popping up. It's a kind of a granular image of the present. It's not lost as an image. It is not an image that is lost in the memory of time. The very present. So, and this is the same year. If you look at it, is it also the next one? This is also the same year where the limit of 72 is the limit of the growth Club of Rome writes, and it's a famous scientist. Everyone comes together to write the limit of the growth. The first proper kind of doubt about the way the logic of growth and productivity is taking us. And this is also the year where the Gaia idea is taken by Lovelock. So the planetary is coming back. So it's a habitation fight. A small village actually intimate a very big planetary shift in the imagination. So that's the cusp, But also, if you look at the GDP, it is also a GDP production. So something happens that period. If you look at it in this graph, though there is a planetary movement, limit of growth. There are women intimating of a certain problem that we have landed up. But there is other forces that are compelling in another direction. So this is the cusp which we come, where irreconcilable forces work together, are staying together, not see, the most important thing, they don't make the one amnesic, like you don't forget the one, they stay together. And that is the most crucial thing that in art practices become, we usually land up working with this binary of memory and amnesia. But here it is not about memory and amnesia. It's a different form of impulse, a different form of trajectories, and how you inhabit yourself in these trajectories. Next. So I just wanted to show you this video, but it's not working properly. This is a small lake in Sweden. It's in Luleå, just where Facebook has all its, a lot of it is European servers are located, because this is, I think 9 years, 9 months a year in snow. So they have this lake, and this lake is over, it's a dam, it's produced by a dam. So what is fascinating is that the reindeer, who used to move around that landscape with great ease and free, and reindeers could not negotiate the lake. The lake is a different water body. The space was made of rivers. So this water body, which is produced, this specific lake, which is produced by a river, by hydroelectric power, produces an imaginary, which is impossible for the reindeer to navigate. So reindeer has to find another path along with it. And that finding the other path becomes the most complicated way in which the new geography has to change. You know? So reindeer will just cannot get lost in the lake. This is a form of work that we did, Blood of Stars. So you can see it's online. So this is so that idea that there was an intimation, there is a cusp, there is a kind of a fault line, there is a memory. There is another short thing that we have been looking at is these histories, these granular histories, which are very much part of our living. Like today, you remember a day. So those at the end of are unresolved. They're still moving. And what are the ways in they move? So this is a very important moment, which is 1927 Chowdhury Lake. There is a group of Hinduism practiced a very pernicious form called untouchability in India, and they would anybody large number of population, which is about 15 to 20% of the population, was marked as untouchable. Whoever worked with so-called toxicity, now we know that it's toxicity, with human waste or animal waste or leather works was called untouchable, pushed out of the settlement. So this is the lake in which a very significant jurist and a thinker takes a whole group of people who are designated as untouchable, and they drink the water. Now, what is the interesting thing, he says, we have not come here to drink your water. It's not a question of we have come here to drink water. We can have water. We have come here to assert our equality over the resource, which you call water. So the idea that this act is, and he connects this act to the idea that this is akin to French Revolution. Now, this is the other thread where the resource is something has to be rethought into the new way, which is what does the claim to resource mean? What does this resource mean? And it is also breaks away from an earlier way of organizing resource. So in the first instance where you saw this women holding the tree was asserting an earlier usage of resource, here they are breaking down an earlier usage of resource to a new egalitarian assertion of resource. Now these are the two threads. These are the two threads that today, in the present debate, in the decolonial, that gets continuously threaded, woven. Sometimes we miss the cues. These cues are very, because this cue of asserting a new principle by which you will lead life also is something that changes the way resource has to be rethought completely. So these are the two threads that, because this is, we inserted it into a book on history of India, Indian art. And they were doing this 100 years history of Indian art. For us, This is a very important, and the last line says that it's renewal of life, very important principle of gathering. The principle of gathering, and all this art is filled with gatherings. I think the art's vital energy is in the gathering, it's not in the artwork. The energy is in the form of gatherings. And so we're trying to rethink the history of gathering. So here we do through the popular image. This image, you will find everywhere in India. Calendars, postage stamps, books, pamphlets, but there is no author. We could not trace the author. It is an unauthored image. So in a sense that it is an unauthored image, but it's granular. It's part of the very memory. And this memory resituates. So we place it in the context of the history of art in India, because this is a history which we have to redraw, history of gathering. History of gathering, enunciating a new principle, which is something that we all aspire in each moment, a gathering enunciating a new principle of life, new principle of art. So I will now come to this, after the cusp, come to second question. This is also something now, this is something that you will all enjoy and understand, because I think a lot of people in the South easily sense it. This is a famous writer James Baldwin's table. His friends was killed in Ceramah, like civil rights movement, and stole on him, and he left America. He came to France, then he went to south of France, and he stayed there till 87. And he, over this table, he had a reading. He had a nice little space and readings. So this table has now suddenly surfaced, and there have been some very interesting things. The whole of the artistic and the intellectual world and the poets, the writers, assembled in this table. That was Baldwin's table, where they would sit and kind of think the work and talk each other about their work. Now Baldwin's table is in this house. Now this house is now going under new development. This table, this image stays with us. And this table as an idea, as an allegory of density, of capture, there are many stains, many stories in the lock of the table. So the table has actually proliferates because many people have the story of the table, but the table is a unit. So it's a unit that proliferates. So, and Baldwin was writing a story that is still unfinished. He was writing a play, but it's remained unfinished. So, so the table is unfinished in that way. So it is not a table that exhausts its possibility, it stays unfinished. The second, this is the other table, so land. So that's the land deed, 1850s, 1870s, 1880s. So the land deed here is a title deed, somebody has a title, but it has many people working and claiming and usage, multiple densities of usage. So that's a land deed which also tells the story of usage, of who came after, who did what, who did what. And this is the title deed that has to be arrived at for it to be transacted globally in the commodity market. That way. So that's that space we call the tenurial density. It's an alchemist, Solomon Benjamin, who developed this term. You can read him, it's very well, it's very available now. His argument is that density is a crisis for the transaction and mobility of land as capital. So, and like the Baldwin's table, this movements has to have, this transactional movements of capital and commodity needs a certain easing of claims to a more recognizable idea of claim, which is primarily property and title. But the tenurial life is like tenurial density. The density that occurs along the table or a land is non-transactable in that sense, but it exists as a kind of a unfinished movement in the world. So now I come to the, so this is the jump, this is now going into art, so-called art object. I just want you to see this video. Yeah. This is from just because we have been researching for some time. This is from a film in 1971 called Interview. I have made this juxtaposition. The film is a classic film. I took two scenes from that. So this is Calcutta, and this is the sequence of the late 60s and early 70s. Was a very, very turbulent city. A lot of people were killed to curb the turbulence. Calcutta. So this is also the big moment where a lot of statues were uprooted, and the film is about basically him trying to get a dress, trying to work out a dress that he will wear to the interview. A suit and a tie. So the film is a intriguing, you can say in the present language, decolonization critique of sartorial forms or in the context. So the wave, this movement, this wave of decolonizing that keeps on appearing in the world is a thread, keeps on appearing. And it has its many moments of, so like that young man smoking, trying to figure out what to wear in the context of this dismantling is something that we all move with. This kind of internal dialogue in the head and large dismantling around us, or large. But on this, we did a work. In Vienna. We just closed actually. It was last year from October to February, and it was called Hungry for Time. It was Vienna Academy of Arts opened its gallery after 5 years, 4.5 years of renovation. It's a very classical 19th century building. It performs the imaginary of Vienna as an imperial site. And in the collection we found this Ivan Schiele signed drawing, and we thought that it was a very, we named it the Headless Man. So we realized that there is a moment now where the epistemic coherence of the world is no longer available to any civilization or any claim to any coherence. So Western civilization do not hold the epistemic coherence that it once did, and there are many claims to it. So it's a kind of a headless man, but headless man is not, it's an unfinished. It's like the Baldwin's play, it's an unfinished. It's that unfinished that became for us an interesting inquiry. So that was the larger question which we call epistemic disobedience. How the epistemic has to be reformulated through actually understanding disobedience as a site of epistemic, which we took from Mindolo. But there is this shadow of this man in this in the history of Vienna. He was Angelo Soliman was Viennese 18th century in the Viennese court. He was in his royal dress, was a royal Moor. He was a royal Moor, then the noble Moor. He was a very important part of the court. Then he became a study, and they started studying him, and then he died, then they mummified him. So what was interesting is that in the course of his life, the epistemic change happened over his body. The way he was dressed up, the way he was studied, the way he was mummified. And interestingly, his story didn't end with the mummy, because his story is now elongated, his shadow is now elongated. So the shadow of Solomon is now long, and it falls on many, many, many other practices in the city. And that it tells us something. Next. So this exhibition had this headless and the shadow of Solomon. But there was a third thing, which is something that I want to explore here. This is the last judgment triptych by Bosch. This is priceless. It cannot be quoted. There is no price. This was a place which is blocked off. You can't touch it. You can't move it. But it has to be in the exhibition. So here was not, because we were working with the collection. This had to be in that exhibition because it is in this room, in this place. It can't be changed. It can't be moved by an inch. It is fixed. It's priceless. So we studied it and we decided to, because Bosch paints on both sides. So we closed the Bosch that you know, the Bosch that you go to see in art history, in museums, you pay power, stand there. We closed it and to reveal the saints. And then there was a small little eel below the saint. And on the right side, you can go to the internet and study this. It's a famous books just on this painting. And next, and we can't read it properly. When we found the story of the eel, because Freud in Triest, when he's 19-year-old, 1920, he's continuously studying eels. He kills about 400 eels to find the sex of the eel, and he never gets an answer. So we juxtaposed the story of the eel with the Hieronymus Bosch, showed the saints. And what was fascinating is the people who liked us said it was very courageous, and there were people who really hated it, and there were the newspapers who were saying it was insult Austrian culture. And that is what is fascinating, is this idea of asset, culture as an asset, culture as a self-defining asset. And next thing. And this is the Discursive Justice Ensemble, a group of film collective with Irate Film Collective invited them to produce this work, which was that Hieronymus Bosch was kept for the restoration, it was kept in a vault. Then from the vault it was being taken back. So they take it back and they looked at the infrastructure of taking back. That infrastructure had in the risk and the security language by which this asset was produced. So their argument is that to move it 1 inch is move it in many inches, because other than force majeure, which is revolution, civil war, earthquake, volcano, nothing can touch it. So it's a fascinating domain. So there is this immobile, it's kind of immobile. Part of infrastructure is immobile in language, in discursive languages. It is protected infrastructure, it is protected through a whole economy that makes it immobile. Okay? So this fragility, it is fragile. It's immobile and fragile. It moves without moving. So in that heart that's the heart of the institutional structure that we landed up inquiring. In that heart, you have to make your moves, and then on it, there are other shadows you trace. So these are the shadows that we trace. Next. So I will just give an example. Is it a work that, how does this work works? Is it a work that works in, that you go to West and you see this immobility and then you find shadows? Or you can find something very close to yourself. So this is in 1970, this is 75th year, 2017, there was 70th year of Indian independence, which was celebrated a lot. there was a lot of other public initiatives to celebrate it. So as artists, being well known in India, we were invited to make a work celebrating 70th year of Indian independence. It was an interesting moment. So we invited a young artist from Mizoram, Tanah, to make a work on when Indian Air Force bombed the capital of Mizoram, which is part of India. Capital was bombed in 1966 in Aizawl, and then that story was hidden away. To make a work on the bombing of Aizawl, as we cannot make it, because coming from mainland India, and our work was, his work was earlier what you saw, where he draws a very beautiful tapestry of bombing of Aizawl. And our work was this letter to him saying, we invite you to draw Aizawl bombing, your Aizawl, and we will receive that. So this idea is that you have to intellectually, discursively, openly displace your position of representation or your position to claim representation towards a space and then open that space up. So this was the artwork itself. So the idea is that it is not just the shadow is external to you. It is not that the shadow is somewhere else and you are outside it. You are very much part of many other shadows that is lingering. And how do you then displace and replace yourself? Okay, so one of the things that we were looking at in the collection was the unfinished or the broken and the unnamed. So this is an incredibly beautiful image of the justice with the head broken. So you found the head. They don't want to show it like this, but we wanted it to be shown. So this is the justice with the head. So we call it deformed justice. So what is intriguing is that this is incredible collection, well noted but unnamed, in the sense that we do not know the writer, do not know the artist. And in these huge collections, it is not necessary. Large number of works are anonymous or unnamed, or the artist not found, or they are just studies. So when culture is rewritten, and artistry as the writing culture as a series of authorships, you actually, in the substrata, is this large number of exquisite thinking that are unauthored. So that's the teneural density you will find in the museum also. So that we found this, and then did a whole choreography on the idea of deformed justice, which we can look later. The book is going to be out in a month. So this was the argument of deformed justice. So next. Okay, now this is something that I want you to. So teneural density produces a problem. How do we name that which is being produced? How do we name the imagination and the association that are produced? Because it's not collaborative, it's associative. And that's the one distinction we now start making, because we are looking at this this unauthored, de-authored world of making and inhabiting life, art, every space, and this idea of deep associations. So we call it associative glimmer. And next image. So if you look at the deltaic formation, and you are all very aware, deltaic formations are very dense ways in which it forms. Habitations, and also floods, habitations grows, various forms of habitation, thickness grows around it. So the idea that, we have tried to work is that in contemporary art, we see a new form of associative engagement, which is not earlier collaborative engagement, which is not calling yourself just. This associative engagement, and this is something that we are trying to think in the writing on this document, and we are trying to write and frame it. This associative thinking, associative living, thinking, produces a sense of glimmer in the world, a glimmer of a possibility, of potentiality. And that glimmer then produces possibilities of rethinking questions of justice, questions of discourse, questions of everything. And that associative glimmer is what we're trying to do. And our main concept we draw from some tracks in Buddhism. Our main concept is the unconstituted. That which yet to be constituted emerges from this associative glimmer. So that's our hypothesis. We are writing in a month's time, we will have written on it. I'm just presenting it because it's on the writing stage. So the argument is that associative glimmer produces a possibility to write the unconstituted, to think the unconstituted or live the unconstituted. So that's the one. So this is something I'll pass over because this is a group. I just wanted to show that this is a group of people we work with for 2 years, and it is they kind of pose this question because they are mobile. They keep on moving between fields, discipline, people, geography with an incredible ease, without any finding and changing themselves as the movement produces new questions. So they are not manifested an idea that they are looking their image or in the world. Their movement is the idea itself. And if something they face that tells them that you are not very right in your formulation, they change it. And they move with it. So this ability, this is this associative paradigm that we are searching. Okay, now the last section. And now this poses a big question for us. This question is, what are the cultural, intellectual sources that you work with? Now, in the present, this is a debate that is at the heart of many debates. What are the sources by which we draw our image of the world? Or narrate the world, or tell the world to each other, or apprehend the world even. So, I'll give an example is that when we did Shanghai Biennale, because it became important for us to talk to artists from China, and then from that conversation talk to artists from elsewhere. We work with two bodies of shared world, which is one is cinema and one is science fiction. Something that we shared with we can share with people. At that time, before Three-Body Problem became a big book, we had proposed it as a dialogue. So the idea was that we took us from something from the history of cinema in the early 70s, and then Three-Body Problem, which actually recurred an image of 1960s turbulence, and then we tried to connect it as a sort of discursive dialogue possibility. So this is, and we never called it source or anything. Just go to the next slide. We took the name, arguments, counter arguments, and stories from this, and we presented it. We argued that this is something of a trigger. But by another 2 years, we understood that this mode of working is producing an interesting question about some correlation between how people are engaging with us and the sources that we are bringing to the dialogue. We are not bringing themes, we are bringing sources. So next slide. So what we did when we were working in Magba in 2018 on the exhibition, we made a scroll of sources. Can you go back? The next one. No. Next. Okay. You see the top scroll? It's a scroll of sources. And the sources were like something that we have found in our, say, this juggler we found in a museum show in a small annotation. This juggler is juggles, and as it juggles, that image icon comes up. People see an icon, they don't see the juggling. So for us, it was a small annotation in a show of a man who works with crafts. The other one was a lecture we heard from on a musician who is, Raqs. So Hindustani classical music and Indian classical music have this idea of the rag. Rag are series of. So he says, when does the rag end? He said, rag doesn't end. How does that when the next rag begins, one rag ends. So the infinity is constituted of many infinities inside. So it is you decide the movement from one to the other. So that we thought that it would be an interesting thing for an artist. So we make such things. So this was the sources that we were working, which was still we and the artist are dialoguing through the source. We're sending them the scroll, they're working with it. Next. Yes, just ask. Excuse me. I read the poem. So by the time we came to Yokohama Triennale, we produced a book 7 months in advance to the opening of the so-called Triennale. The Triennale event. Events are usually a few 3 months or 2 months exhibition. That is what people associate Triennale and Biennale with. So we opened it and made it public through a public event and series of books in Japanese and English, our sources. And here the sources are Nobel laureate, to an academic, to a daily wager, to a woman who leaves home to travel in other and marries someone from different languages, different culture. The 16th century manuscript which does not differentiate between bodybuilding and thinking the stars. It does not differentiate between feeding an elephant and taking a good meal. So we found the sources, and what we did, we edited it a volume and we released the volume in public for a discursive environment and an epistemic question that then will come to work with the exhibition of the Triennale. And this we found extremely productive because a lot of interesting, engaging discussions started taking place, and since we were hit by pandemic, after some time, this kind of, in an interesting ways, became the exhibition in the imagination. So a lot of people saw the exhibition, it opened after a delayed start. But somewhere, these sources produced an imaginary exhibition in relationship to the main exhibition. And the sources also bring us to this important dialogue. What are the cultural resources and the epistemic conditions that we produce for culture and for our practice to be read and to be narrated and to be worked with and discussed with each other? Okay, this is a small poem I wanted to read. So I will read this poem reading. I go to the next category. Next. Okay, this is last concept. This is the Nishastaga. This is the front. There was this place outside the outskirts of Delhi, which has recently been taken, and a lot of people from so-called squatter settlements in the city were taken there. So this place is just being made, and a young writer working with me, and his father is to he started his life in Delhi as a recycle rack picker, recycle picker, and then made a small little go down. Very, very beautiful man. He said this place is like Nishastaga. So what he said was that the place has not tamed time yet. The time is untamed here. So, and nobody will be called abused on the basis of that they have not worked on time, that you are in time or out of time. So this idea that you can reach and read a moment in your life where you can see a moment which is pregnant with possibility but has not been tamed by time. So this idea that Nishastaga is something that we now more and more try to understand, that this question of actually moving away from being tamed by the dominant time. And this is a place where people are coming to rebuild life. But he saw in it a pregnant and potential of another order of time that is always bubbling there. So that's the last. Yes. So this is the word I wanted to end with, broadly. Very simply. Thank you.
No, wait. One more. Is it last? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're short of time, but I hope that we will have a bit of time to kind of round up and also have some questions.
question and answer from the audience. Thank you, Jeebesh, for sharing with us these new vocabularies to talk about the noun, vocabularies such as the caravanserai, bunker vision, and so on. Because I think it's really important, because as we know, if we keep on repeating words like collaboration or global art and decolonization, these very important terms may lose its weight and significance, so it's important for us to find new ways of talking about issues related to it. So I think that's what I find very important and very inspiring about the terms that you are introducing and trying to explain to us what it means. So any questions from the floor first? If not, maybe I'll start. So there are a few words, a few terms that you explained to us. One is the caravanserai, the next one is bunker vision, and then there's the term cusp, tenurial densities, shadows, and associative glimmer. Could you explain a little bit more about the word glimmer that is used there? Because that's the bit that I personally didn't quite understand. I know that you were trying to distinguish between collaboration and association, and you were saying that association produces glimmer, a glimmer of possibility of creating injustice, discourse, and so on and so forth. But also associated with the word glimmer is things like sparkle and things that effervesce and things that. So yeah, I was.
One thing, there is a beautiful essay by Svetlana Blom, who died unfortunately 2 years back. She was a retreat. It's a scenography of friendship. It's on internet also, which became our sources for Yokohama, where she talks about a kind of a friendship not as enlightenment but as luminosity. Now, luminosity is something that it's experiential, it happens, but it doesn't claim permanency, like the way enlightenment does. There's a certain kind of. So she says that the male friendships are about enlightenment. That there's two hands joined, so it's about enlightenment. And female friendships, she says, is about luminosity. It's about, it comes and goes. It produces a moment of great rejoice of life, but it doesn't hold on to it. So one of the things that we're trying to draw is that we call it, we took that luminosity and luminosity in care practices, luminosity. If you look at description of care practices, you see this description of luminosity, because it's a very tough practice. And it's interesting that Svetlana Baum talked about women and luminosity, because actually anybody in a very tough living practice does go through it, but it's the luminosity that gives rise to your persistence. So for us, we wanted to draw that thread. So from luminosity we're searching, and then so associated luminosity didn't make any sense. Though we have used the word luminous will, we have to work with that. But somewhere we needed something that is sparkles, that moves between, that has an electric energy, that shines and moves along. So I think the glimmer, the word glimmer captured it. And it also did something more to the associated. The associated didn't look like an association of people, as it looks like always potentially pregnant with the possibility of producing something. And it's nice, like nice firecrackers in the sky. Like that.
Okay, yes, I think that clarifies a lot why you chose the word glimmer, especially when you contrast it with the word enlightenment and how luminosity, and then your version, which is glimmer, how it sparks and shine. And I think it's a gentler and the emphasis on care that drives your persistence, and how it creates a spark, and there's a kind of joy to it. So I think I understand what you mean by the word glimmer, and I think that's very relevant to our situation where there is darkness and goodness all over the world at the moment.
It's binary, it's dark light, dark light. So it's kind of a trap.
Yeah.
Just to move away from it.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's a very interesting concept. I'll open it up to the floor again in case of anybody ada yang mau nanya dalam bahasa Indonesia juga bisa.
Yeah, you can say.
Iya tadi, oke.
Can you take off your nose? Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation. I think there are a lot of things that come to my mind and become kind of badai.
Bisa perkenalkan dulu kan?
Thank you for your presentation, and my name is Rifki. You can call me Rifki. Came from nearby. I got some kind of idea of the whole things that you already shared before. But can you tell us more about the idea of that you already shared before about this scenography of friendship? That friendship will involve care, like Mitha already said before. I want to ask the idea of time itself. How and through your practice, how we can deal with this idea of time to bringing us together in terms of solidarity and another kind of things, and in relation with labor, because time will involve also the thing that we already said, resources. Time is the resources itself, and how we can like share our time or distribute our time when some people have a lot of time because they have a lot of resources, or we can call it money, and the other didn't have. How we are going to connect or being together with the idea or in the intersection between time, labor, and resources. Do you have any kind of comments on that, and or by kind of relating to your practice? I think those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that very, very important question. I think one thing on that capital, time is a transactable and a readable, measurable form. And production is along the temporal logic. The shop floor is a conquer of time. If you conquer time, but the thing is that with a highly automated system, the way capital would like to do is do away with the human experience of time. Even the linear, procedural experience of time to move towards a more kind of a more instantaneous movement of time. Like, say, if you look at just-in-time production, which comes in 80s, which was very crucial in the way out the whole global economy was recrafted in terms of the production line. So the whole global flow becomes the site of production line. That reorders our experience of time. And so there is this productive idea of time that runs through from early capital, concretizing post-capital. And then there is this parallelly, the time of economy as something which is always faces the crash, the boom and the crash time. So the production apparatus, linearity and procedural breakdown and production of time, and the crash and the boom time, both. So the crash and the boom time is not supposed to be overcome. We are supposed to always overcome the crash time, and always lingering close to the crash time. And then, so both this time has come to some kind of a historical kind of, you can say, closure with the idea of the catastrophe or the apocalypse or the climate change. Both this time. So in the sense that one of the work that we try to do is that after the progressivist conquer of the linear time and the world has to be measured through stages of life that are kind of shadows of each other, after that breakdown in the 90s and late 90s, what happened to this time? So we know that there is a time that is occurring around production which is increasingly globally very uncertain, because the global measure of production time is very uncertain now. And we know the time that is looking ahead for a new generation completely. When I'm teaching, half of the time it's very difficult to express any future time. Future time is something very apocalyptic. And now in art world you will see that most expressed is that the historical time now more and more is seen as horror. So the history becomes history of just recording as a horror. So it's like almost a time gone, unrecoverable, something like that. So we are in a cusp where the historical narration of time and the productive time both are not coherent anymore. Even its practitioner, even the Bank of England, or even the practitioner of productive times, they do not have confidence in it. And so what will happen in this decade, how the idea of productive time and the climate time and the time of crisis will play out, I'm not so sure, but it is something that we know. That's why we're saying Vishwastaga is something that we know has to be reinvented completely, and now this will be reinvented at the planetary level with everyone having stakes in it. I don't think it will come from one civilization or one side. But however well-intelligent manpower is being mobilized, it cannot come from that. And it will come from the ground of various experiences. That's why one of the things that we working on this idea of the cusp, the tenural density, that this blurs the idea of progressivist time, blurs the idea of productive time. We can talk about it later. It's very interesting. Also, Berlin Biennale recently had this debate. It's a very interesting debate, because the historical time of the post-immigrant, Kader is from an Algerian family. They have gone through a real difficult time where violence has been very close to the migrant. So their ability to talk that historical time is being challenged by people who have last 20 years is facing a different form of violence, a different form of imperial violence from Iraq, whose language is not colonialism. It's a different form of it. And so the question is, this historical time which they are facing, can it be narrated by an experience of an earlier historical time? So these questions are becoming very, very sharp in art world. And I think I really like contemporary art because these questions are like a real fire bomb here. These are not academic questions in art world. The question of life and death, for artists. So the future of the production is connected to this. It's a very interesting question, I think. We have to keep on investigating. Thank you.
Okay, waktunya udah habis, time's up, but I think we all come away with a lot. So thank you very much, Jeebesh. And we will try to continue asking about Jeebesh things. So yeah, thank you everybody. So now let's move on to the report.
alunan sendu dan syair yang menawan mengalun di sana, menyayat hatiku. Dan nada yang sendu, puisi yang menawan terjalin bersama. Oh, nyanyian sunyi, tanah yang permai, yang kaya.